Friends, tonight's event is a discussion, as Ciara said, being organised under the auspices of Sinn Féin's Commission on the Future of Ireland. And the Commission's aim, very simply, is to promote grassroots engagement on the key issues associated with the present discourse around constitutional change in Ireland. We would like events such as this to expand and deepen popular democratic participation in this growing conversation about what must become our shared future. Last Saturday, the Apprentice Boys of Derry had their annual parade here in the city. This is now a settled issue, but it wasn't always so. The resolution of the parade's issue in Derry became a reference point within our peace process. How did a seemingly intractable dispute, which was the source of decades of division, instability and conflict, culminate in a resolution? Now, I think tonight we should think about that. It's relevant to the panel and the audience discussion we're about to have. Why? Because it took courage, a willingness to engage, to embrace and manage change, to recognise that the status quo wasn't working, and a willingness to compromise. Those are the essential ingredients. And it was eventually about agreeing on the need to show respect for difference and diversity. Despite its history of conflict and turbulence, this city has now become synonymous with cultural diversity and building bridges. In fact, one of your bridges is a physical symbol of Derry's role in peace building and bringing people together. Not far away from here, just across the city walls, there's an interpretive centre which is owned and run by the Apprentice Boys themselves. The flourishing Culturnan Canning, which sits on Great James's Street, is a hub for the promotion of Gaelic and Irish culture. And just over the county border in Donegal, the Ulster Scots tradition of East Donegal is celebrated at the museum and the centre not far from Carrigan. The old Ebrington military base behind us across the river, which housed a centuries-old British Army garrison presence here in Derry, has now become a thriving economic and job creation centre and a place of communal diversity, shared space, and where people come together. Change is happening here, across the north and throughout Ireland. And the conversation on constitutional change is everywhere. Now, Irish unity isn't inevitable, but everybody is talking about the possibility. It is on the political horizon. The academic and the economic modelling and mapping has already begun. Books and research papers on every aspect of Irish reunification are being published. And all of that is being fuelled by demographic change and electoral realignment north and south. In the north, the once permanent unionist electoral majority has gone. And in the south, a centuries-old dominance of the two big conservative parties has also now been eclipsed. Change is in the air. There's a desire for something new to replace the status quo, and it's palpable. And it's growing in momentum. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus is credited with the saying that change is the only constant in life. But change needs to be managed. I'm claiming that one. With the establishment of our peace settlement, the Good Friday Agreement gave us a framework of rules and values to manage democratic change and the ongoing transformation of this place which we all call home. Then came Brexit, and everything changed again. Economic and political relations between and throughout these islands have now been dramatically impacted. The democratic demand for Scottish independence is resurgent once again, and increased autonomy powers for Wales are also being demanded. The United Kingdom has become terminally disunited. And isn't it ironic that the British Conservative and Unionist Party has been the major dynamic which has driven that change and undermined the state of the Union itself? 12 years of Tory rule have turned the North into a backwater, with substandard economic performance, low productivity, low educational achievement, and the worst health outcomes of any region in these islands. And those are objective realities, and I state them only to set context for what I now want to say. Then the Tories imposed Brexit, and they imposed Brexit against our will, out of an economic and a funding lifeline which is breached to the EU, and then to top it all off, they do a U-turn on the protocol. Friends, Tory rule is bad for everyone's health, and it's bad for our basics of subsistence, regardless of our religious, our political, or our ethnic backgrounds. So, for consideration in tonight's discussion, is it not better to reflect on the potential of being a first-class citizen in a new Ireland, in control of our own affairs, rather than a second-class citizen in Tory Brexit Britain? Brexit has put the constitutional status of the North centre stage, and it has triggered an unprecedented conversation about the future. Many, and including an undefined section of people from Protestant backgrounds, are engaged. And something very profound is happening. The landscape is changing. And I think that was in evidence at the recent Ireland's Future discussion, which took place in the Ulster Hall in Belfast. But it's also reflected in the Together UK group launched by Arlene Foster. I think that's a welcome development. Admittedly, the stated aim of Together UK is to counter growing support for constitutional change in Ireland. But all sides do need to be heard, and it makes sense for both the proponents and the opponents of Irish unity to be engaged with each other in respectful and rational debate. The Good Friday Agreement gives us the mechanism to bring about constitutional change through the exercise of self-determination. It also provides a framework of protections and rules which can address division, inequality, and sectarianism, but really importantly, also to promote inclusion, pluralism, and diversity. So tonight's discussion is about how we build for and look forward to the future. Our past remains contested, but the future doesn't have to be. I believe it's now time to open up a new phase of our peace process, to create solid bridges which are built upon anti-sectarianism and progressive and pluralist values. Because the new Ireland can't be the old Ireland. And we deserve a democratic and a pragmatic discussion which deals with constitutional change in the context of quality of life issues. And that's a discourse that moves way beyond the chaos and the dysfunction that has been caused by Brexit. So we should be discussing the questions being asked by those who remain to be persuaded about the merits of Irish reunification. So, for example, Can we protect public services, guarantee pensions, and create decent jobs and pay in a new constitutional national democracy? Can we create an Irish National Health Service and design an education system which becomes a world leader in relation to the provision of skills and educational attainment? Can we educate our children together and not apart? Can we agree new constitutional democratic structures which will accommodate all identities and traditions? Can we eradicate sectarianism, racism, and segregation? Friends, yes we can. But just as, and more importantly, we must. The discussion about Irish unity should be managed in a systematic way, and all voices need to be heard. So the conversation has to be planned, to be opened up, and to be democratised. A conversation which is pragmatic and not distracted by fake news, sentimentality, or nostalgia. Planning towards a new Irish constitutional democracy means engaging with the economic and the social priorities of today. Healthcare, pensions, jobs, and the way back into the European Union. And we will not move forward by looking backwards. It is indeed time to plan. Present-day Irish society is already multicultural and multilingual. That's our strength, diversity and inclusion. So, let me say, and for the avoidance of any doubt or misapprehension, Sinn Féin and genuine Irish Republicans are absolutely committed to accommodating the Orange tradition and the British identity in a new Ireland. Orange parades without dissension in a new Ireland, of course. It has been ever thus in Roslauda, Gojohn and Yor. And Derry showed how this could be done 20 years ago. So our future is not one to be one of contested green and orange, but instead one to be built on a celebration of our rainbow diversity. My appeal to our Protestant neighbours and unionist people in our society who may already be considering this process of change, or who may hold reservations about reunification, is to identify the guarantees and the protections which are important for you. You see, Sinn Féin doesn't own the discussion around Irish unity. We want it to be inclusive, flexible and genuine. And nor do we claim to have all the answers. And that's why structured dialogue is essential. A genuine and an open discussion should be taking place about the principles and the reassurances required to underpin a new constitutional settlement on our island. That's why the Irish government should establish an all-island citizens' assembly without further delay. The people should be sovereign. It is they who must self-determine our future on this island. And everyone should have their say. And no one should be left behind. A new era in Ireland's history is dawning. One which can and will be better than the one that went before. And which can be full of opportunity, hope, promise, and shared prosperity for all. And we, all of us in this society, we can be its author by showing generosity and grace, and by making compromises and stretching out to one another with the hand of friendship. So, made it way, Steve, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's panel discussion.
And I want to thank the Commission for giving me the honour of chairing this meeting this evening. It's important that we stress at the outset that this is your meeting. This is not a Sinn Féin meeting. The Sinn Féin speakers have spoken and given us a background to the conversation that we're about to have. But the important thing here will be that we will engage with our panel, and that engagement, I expect, will encourage yourselves to engage and to put questions to us.
JD Gardinian, Tommy Intasasta, a bully live and up catch the killer. Tassul Ugam Bebudge when he sultas Agischa August a fulham and up the killer. Not bad for I want to introduce myself by looking at the past in this kind of way. When I was growing up in Drumore, Protestant town in County Down, as a wee fella, I never could have envisaged I would come to a largely Catholic city here in Derry to be minister of a Presbyterian church. Nor could I ever have envisaged myself wearing a British Army uniform and serving in Afghanistan as hospital chaplain. Growing up, never did it cross my mind that one day I would meet and shake hands with Martin McGuinness. Speak at Sinn Féin's Ardèche, their first Ardèche in the north, at Belfast Waterfront Hall, and then go on to write a book about what President Clinton described as my remarkable friendship with Martin McGuinness. A group I was in, a social group, and somebody said to me, David, you must have regrets, because they knew, there's been a little bit turbulent doing what I've been doing. And I said, if I have a regret, it is this, that I didn't reach out to Martin earlier. The conversation ended with mouths dropping open. Why am I interested in being part of this tonight? Well, I'm aware that the winds of democratic change are blowing. The Unionist Protestant community is not blind. They nonetheless are not rushing to participate. Okay, there is evidence of some here, there and yonder who might be participating in the water cooler conversations, but there are not many, and therefore anything that transpires in terms of shaping a future that's going to be better for everyone, it needs the Unionist voice strongly coming into the conversation. And essentially, I want tonight to represent the Unionist Protestant tradition in the engagement that I look forward to having here this evening in the City Hotel. Good night.
Thank you. Well, I suppose I would start by saying that I am driven and consider myself to be a strong Republican woman, very proud of my community, very proud of the city that I'm from, and I suppose my motivation behind this conversation is ensuring that firstly we define rights in their broadest sense in any new Ireland, and those rights need to be the rights of those who identify as being British, reproductive rights, gender equality rights, social and economic rights, a huge broad definition of rights. And I think that is driven by, as we will all know, that very well-used principle of cherishing all the children of the nation equally. And that for me has to be a driving point in relation to this discussion and any discussion going forward around a new Ireland. So, as people will know or maybe not know, that the last 4+ years I have managed a project known as the Derry model. Now there has already, I suppose, been reference to what that is. And I think for me, part of this conversation is that Derry people of whatever persuasion have those principles in spades. They have the ability to show huge leadership. They have the ability to take risks. And I think more importantly, have the ability and have proven themselves to get stuff done. So, you know, if we look at this city around issues like Bloody Sunday, the campaign for public inquiry, a public apology from the former British Prime Minister, the parading agreement that has been referred to, and importantly, how those parading agreements are actually maintained. Because one of the things about any constitutional conversation is that you can't simply get it in place and walk away. So there's ongoing work that needs to be done, you know, almost daily in that regard. But my experience of dealing with those who would identify as unionists and loyalists over the last number of years, and myself and Denzel had this conversation on air today. Hopefully we'll see the same things tonight. But there are people that are having this conversation. And I've had quite senior loyalists saying to me, you know, anybody who's not reflecting on constitutional change are burying their head in the sand. So there are people there, and I'm not naive to say that aren't having the conversation and don't want to have the conversation. But I do think that people who are thinking their way through this are having the conversation. And I think here's a critical point for me, Chair, this evening as well. What's missing in this discussion is both, you know, the message and the acceptance that this change, which is coming, I'm totally convinced of it, is not about doing onto any section of society what was done onto another section of society. It is not about reinventing or recreating the conditions that existed in our past. Who wants to go down that road again? So it is about engaging and saying to people of different political persuasions, you have nothing to fear from constitutional change. In my view, there is much, much to be gained. So I'll just leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose I would have to say at the outset that when I discovered that Joe was a former teacher, former principal, I was slightly unnerved because I have very bad memories of being asked to explain myself by principals. And again, at the outset, I should say that as regards my identity, I would very much identify as Protestant Irish, which is probably a voice that isn't heard often enough. So if I talk a wee bit about myself, and that might explain why I'm here and why I'm so keen to take part in conversations like this. First of all, I'm very pleased to be in Derry. Usually when I come here, it's something to do with football, should it be the Foyle Cup or whatever. When I was a young boy, my uncle from Enniskillen was a Derry City supporter and brought me regularly to the Brandywell. At that stage, Derry City were playing in the Irish League in the north, and I have little memories of players like Dougie Wood, and I always remember the pitch at the Brandywell, which after a few weeks into the season was completely mud and sand right up the middle with a bit of grass on both wings. So a lot has changed since those days in many, many ways, and certainly in the area where I grew up, there have been massive changes. As regards my own background, I was born in a housing estate in Enniskillen called Cornagrade, which was very mixed. All the fellows that I ran about with and played football with and whatever were both Protestants and Catholics. Enniskillen's actually quite a good town for mixed relationships like that. I suppose coming from a very evangelical Baptist background, there weren't many political discussions in our house, to be perfectly honest with you. I suspect, although they never say it, I suspect that my parents voted Unionist. They were quite happy with the status quo. At that stage, that was probably about as far as they went. There would never have been any talk about a united Ireland back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up, but just in our sort of circle of friends and so on, it didn't happen. And that's a massive change. When I grew up in the 50s and 60s, Fermanagh was largely dominated politically by unionism, big house unionism. In the 1950s, we had our MP was the Duke of Westminster, or Robert Grosvenor, who became the Duke of Westminster, one of Europe's richest men. So you can imagine what he did for working class Protestants like us, which is virtually nothing. So the change has been massive over the years. We talk often, and I'll come to why I'm here, but we talk often about change, and there have been loads of change like that, about a new Ireland. I think in a sense we are already in a new Ireland, because the demographics have changed. We have a young, modern, go-ahead people who don't really want the old things of the past. They want to think about things like climate change, LGBT, etc., etc. So there's a complete change among our younger people. And as I think you mentioned it today, we have about the new communities that are here as well, in large numbers. So Ireland has already changed. And the reason I'm here, to be perfectly honest, is I think we need a big conversation about how we grab that change and move on. There isn't enough conversation from Protestants and Unionists. I would worry for them because change is already happening. There will be more change happening, and they need to be part of that conversation and say what sort of new Ireland they want to be part of, because it is happening anyway. I would agree with David that there are conversations going on. I think, as I said on Radio Foil today, at the 3 Arena in Dublin a couple of months ago, Jimmy Nesbitt said, conversations are going on, and they are going on all the time. Unfortunately, there's that disconnect between political unionism and unionism on the ground, where people are talking about it privately, but it's not being reflected on the media. So that's where I'm coming from. I think it's very, very important for someone like myself. I suppose I would have to say, come back to what I said at the outset, being Protestant Irish is important to me. I don't speak for unionists because I'm not a unionist, but there are such a myriad of identities and opinions in this country at the moment that we need everybody to be part of the conversation.
Thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. I'm often very curious as to why I'm asked, but I am grateful to be able to participate in the conversation. I'll tell you a bit about myself first before why I want to be here. I know a lot of people in this room, or have worked with them or campaigned with them in some way, shape or form. I'm from Derry. My parents are from Tyrone. I grew up very traditionally Presbyterian, unionist home. My parents were and still are unionist voters. I guess things were very black and white for me growing up. I knew I was British. I had no connection to my Irish identity at all, and I went to 2 Protestant schools, Lisnagelvin and Foyle. Foyle was fairly mixed, but most of the people from the Catholic, Nationalist, Republican background that I would have known would have been on a fairly middle class economic background. So the chance to meet really working class Republican communities were few and far between when I was growing up in Derry. Ironically, it was when I moved to England that I started to connect with my Irishness. My accent couldn't deny the fact that I was, I suppose, but I also got involved in student politics and realised that my politics very much lay to the left. The Iraq War was starting, and that was a huge shift for me, because I started to realise that everything I'd been told, everything I believed about a government, about a system, that I had always felt was morally right, was not necessarily true. And so my perspective started to change massively, and I started to question my Britishness. I guess then I came back to Derry, a lot more open to listening and to listening to a community that I never really had the chance to hear. So I started working in community development, and I found a home in the gas yard, and I will be forever grateful to the communities in the Bogside and Craigan for being so open and honest with their conversations with me, someone who was a stranger for all intents and purposes, but they really accepted me as a Derry girl. And whether it was over a glass of wine or 7 or a cup of tea, I really felt like I started to connect with people and to understand a perspective that I was different from my own, but that was just as true and relevant. I also found kindred spirits in the women of Alliance for Choice, whose politics and unapologetic campaigning for their reproductive rights were something that I really connected with. And then about 10 years ago, I went to Gael School with Kevin Campbell, who I think's in the room somewhere, who was my colleague at the time and a Gael goer. And I was completely blown away by these bilingual children in this school, 8 years old, 9 years old, lived around a school around the corner from where I lived. I now live in the Fountain in the city centre, which I suppose is the only community that could be described as loyalist on this side of the river. But this school existed, something that I didn't imagine could happen. It seemed quite alien to me, almost European. We're such a monolingual society. So I had a very emotional response to that school and to those children. I started learning Irish, and I now work in Culturland. And the language, I suppose, more than any symbol or flag or colour, has helped me connect to my Irishness in a way that I never thought was possible. I now run a project where we try and offer access to the language to people who don't have it or who don't feel like they have permission to access it. There is a perception about who owns it, about who has access to it, about who it belongs to, and what we do is provide outreach classes. And I feel in a very tangible way the connection that people make to the language, how it makes them feel about the place where they are, how it helps them understand our customs, about things that I think the title of Claire Mitchell's book, The Ghostlam, is a really good one because it's been there for so long, but we just had never known it or never been able to connect to it. And so the reason I'm here tonight, I suppose I realise that my Britishness, which I very much feel, is not about symbols or flags or a border or which government I'm connected to. It's about familiarity of customs and people. I've been to almost every part of that island. I have friends, I've lived there, I've worked there, I understand the language. I feel very at home there, and I don't feel that will ever change, regardless of what the constitutional changes are that come. I also feel very connected to my Irishness. I have 2 children. I feel like for a lot of my life I was denied access to the Irish language and to the part of me that is Irish, and I don't want them to feel the same way. So they both attend Gael School even more now, and they run rings around me in terms of the language. I keep telling myself it's a slow and steady process, and I feel it, but they do run rings around me. And what I very much feel about here is that our current system is not working. It's not working for the community that I live in, which struggles massively every day economically and with huge mental health issues. 2 of my neighbours died recently. One was 19 and one was 36, a mother and son. Both victims of an inadequate justice system and an inadequate mental health system. So the current system is not working for this place. It won't work for my children, it won't work for my nieces and nephews, and I feel like a new island, a shared island, a new process is such an opportunity. Like, who else gets this? To start a community based on your value and what you're worth. And I remember a teacher of Irish once saying that he felt like the environment in a Gael school was different because within the Irish language is the idea that your worth is in what you contribute and how you treat people and the place around you, rather than in what you own and how much you're worth. And I very much feel that if we can build a society that is based around that, that excites me more than, conversations around difference. And I do think our Britishness or our Irishness doesn't have to change, or how we feel about it based on a line on a map, but our quality of life and how we feel about this place and how we feel about each other can absolutely change if the process is right. And so I am really glad that suddenly we're acknowledging that there is an alternative Protestant voice, a dissenting Protestant, whatever you want to call it, that it exists. And actually, it's not small, it's, it's substantial. And so for us, I suppose, who are from that community or from that cultural background, there is a challenge to try and engage other people who aren't ready or aren't prepared to have this conversation. That's as much on us as it is on everybody else to try and engage them. And I guess it's also not to be quiet anymore, that alternative voice is here, it's not going away, it's larger than we all imagined. And it actually could be quite a decision maker, and at the end of things, if there is ever to be a vote on constitutional change, those unionists, Protestants, people from that background who are in the curious middle ground may be the decision makers. So thank you very much.